All right, this is our first lesson in chapter 12, and this is all about 3D shapes. So today we're going to just do some, we just call it exploring 3D shapes. We're going to do some different vocab and learn about how to talk about all the 3D shapes that we're going to do surface area and volume of. So first off, we're going to talk about the word polyhedron and being able to tell the difference between the two. So here are some pictures of things that are polyhedrons, and then here are some things that are not. So what is the main difference in these pictures? Well, these ones all have straight edges. They're made up of polygons, so straight edged shapes. And these ones all have some kind of curve in them, which are not polygons. So we can still name these and talk about them, but the difference between being a polyhedron and not being a polyhedron is just whether or not you have a curved side. So the difference is just a curved side. So how are we going to know if a shape is a polyhedron? We're just looking for whether or not it has a curved edge. If it has any curved edges or round edges, then it is not a polyhedron. How are we going to name them? That's a big deal because we do spend a lot of time talking about the names of these shapes. And we want to start with the base. So whatever the base of the shape is, and then plus it's either going to be a prism or a pyramid. So our first one here, its base, the one that it's kind of sitting on for a pyramid, is this triangle shape. So this is called a triangular. And since it comes to a point, it is a pyramid. The next one, the base, it isn't always what it sits on when we get to the next one, but it's which side is repeated on the other end of the shape. So this one is going to be a hexagonal prism because it is made up of all of these rectangles, whereas a pyramid is made up of a bunch of triangles. So this is a triangle focus. This is a rectangle focus. And this one, the base is a hexagon, so it is called a hexagonal prism. This one, it looks like the base might be this rectangle that it's sitting on, but that base is not also at the top of the shape. You don't have a bookend, a top and a bottom with the same shape. So actually this base right here, this pentagon, is repeated on the other end of the shape. So this is our base. So this is a pentagonal prism. It is made up of prism. It is made up of mainly rectangles, and so that makes it a prism and not a pyramid. This one doesn't really have a name since it's made up of two shapes together, kind of like a half cylinder and then half of a rectangular prism. Not half, but a rectangular prism. This one we can talk about. This one, you could call it a circular pyramid, but we have a more common name for it. We call this a cone. So there are lots of shapes that we're going to be naming. We always start with the base, and then we talk about whether or not it is a pyramid or a prism. Our next vocab word is convex or concave. So the main difference here is it looks like these pictures are all kind of pushed out, like they're made up of, I don't know how else to say it, like the figures are all pushed out, as opposed to these ones where they all have these dents coming in or caves coming in. So what's the difference is these ones are kind of, the shape is like, imagine there's air in there and the air is pushing them out. And the concave is they have a dent or they've been caved in at some point. Cross sections are kind of like if you have a loaf of bread. That's the way that I like to talk about it. And if you could just reach inside the bag of bread and pull out one loaf, that would be like a cross section of the whole loaf. Oftentimes when we give you guys pictures of them, they're going to have the cross section drawn so that we're all doing the cross section the same way. So you could do horizontal cross sections. You can also do vertical cross sections. And actually you can do both kinds on every shape. So this one happens to be a horizontal cross section. So just imagine that triangular pyramid is standing there, and then we're just kind of like cutting the top off and then opening it up and looking at that top. So I would see this triangle right here as that kind of knife comes through and cuts the top of that. So this one would be a triangle. Another thing to note is that we're looking at a 3D shape, but our cross section will always be 2D. So think of a shape or a name for a shape that's only in 2 dimensions. So triangles, squares, rectangles, pentagons, that kind of stuff. Next one is a cylinder, and when we cross section it, so when we cut it horizontally, just right through the middle, and if I lifted that up, I would actually see a rectangle. If you can believe that. If we cut it the other way, if we cut it vertically, we would definitely see that circle in the middle if we cut. Next up is a cone, and when we cut it horizontally like that, we see a circle. This will really break your brain. If I cut it vertically, I would actually see a triangle. Next up is this hexagonal prism. So when it's being cut vertically, I see this hexagon in there. If we were to cut it the long way, this way, we would see a rectangle just like that one. So different ways to do cross sections. Again, usually when we do them, we'll give you kind of the picture as it's being cut into the shape. The last thing we're going to talk about is something called a net. And a net is just like the fold out plan. It's kind of like the map for the shape. So any one of these shapes, we could cut it apart and then lay out all of the pieces. And that's what a net is. So a net is like all of the pieces that it would take to fold up and make a shape. So this is where your mental picture has to help a little bit. If we were to cut this and fold it on that line and fold it on this line and then fold up these triangles, it would make a prism. Oops, prism. As the majority of the shapes are rectangles. And then the base, the shape that is repeated on the top and the bottom, it would be a triangle. So this would be a triangular prism. Next, they'd like us to draw a pentagonal pyramid. So that means that the base is a pentagon. And then off of each of the sides of the pentagon are triangles. And all of those triangles will fold up. Imagine them folding up to make the top of the pyramid. This last one, all of these are the exact same size and shape. So this must be a prism of some kind. And since its base is a rectangle, I could call this a rectangular prism. We can make an argument. I didn't mark the picture for you, but they look like they're all the same square. So we could also call this a cube. And that's your first day, just kind of dabbling in some vocab. You'll have an assignment with a lot of the vocab: concave, convex, which things are polyhedron, and then cross sections.